Because of December and January, obviously with the Christmas holidays and things along those lines, we don't do quite as much as we normally do. So updates are a little bit low for January, but there's a few things that we would just like to highlight and talk about. For those that are new to these sessions, generally these are about things that as our customers, you can touch and feel. Okay, that's really what these are about. So we don't talk about bug fixes and things like that unless it's very much a user visible bug. Okay, so this is an example of what was a user visible bug. For those of you that use our training management system, so the Skillable LMS, we actually had a problem if you was doing bulk edit of multiple users. So you're doing bulk edit of users and those users were in different orgs. We would actually, unfortunately, set the website, which would be that user's sort of login page, all to the same value, which was a bit of a problem. So we fixed that. Okay, so that is a bug that we rolled out in the platform over the last few days. And also Skillable Connect. So some of you might not be familiar with Skillable Connect. So Skillable Connect is what we refer to as our API technology. So this could be actually our API in, so people sending requests into us, or it could be the APIs we use to communicate with external LMSs like Docebo in this case. So Skillable Connect are the team that actually do all of the coding work around this. And we did find that we had a bug with Docebo, with the way that Docebo's implemented LTI 1.3. They actually were, there's a date and time field that goes backwards and forwards with the messages. And we was actually sending too much data. I think our time was actually down to the millisecond and they only wanted it down to the second. So we had to reduce the precision of the data that we were sending. This didn't impact any other implementations and it just makes sure that scoring works with Docebo now. So just a small improvement there, but it fixes a significant bug. Most people are here because of Studio, because we're lab developers, hence the lab developer workshop. So sometimes this is the most interesting section of the platform update. So again, couple of little bug fixes. Okay, the first thing is we had some inaccuracies, maybe is the best way to describe it, with the Japanese translation of the Skillable Studio lab client. Effectively, we use the term power or the Japanese for power in the wrong sense. So think about turning like powering on a PC, powering off a PC, powering on a machine. It really wasn't that. The actual Japanese we had in there was more about power source, not powering a machine on or powering a machine off. So there were some translation issues there. So we just had to resolve that. So those have all been done. The other thing, now some of you might not have come across this yet, depending where you are with the Skillable platform. When you create blocks of text, you can actually enable features like type text and things. And there's also the ability to enable the text to be copied. And there is a modifier where you can say, don't let people copy this text by just clicking on it. And even though you enabled the flag, it didn't work. So in reality, we'll just fix that now. So the no copy option actually works now. So it removes the ability for the user just to click on it to copy it. Of course, they can still highlight it and copy it from the instructions panel, but it now honors the correct markdown syntax. What I'd also like to talk about is a new feature that should actually be appearing shortly. And I say new feature, it really depends which side of the line you're on, really. We're actually going to be releasing very early in February the new dashboard. So this is the new Skillable dashboard. Okay. Now, for those that are relatively new to Skillable, you might be saying, well, what's the old dashboard? Okay, because you don't maybe go in that often, things along those lines. So this is the old dashboard that most people would see at this precise moment. Okay, so you've got your lab profiles on the left, you've got your lab instances on the right, fairly sort of static lists. You've got to create new and a couple of search buttons, and then this sort of pretty boring button with respect to Lab Advisor. Okay, so this is the new dashboard that will be going live in the next week or so. Okay, so you'll log in at some point, maybe towards the end of next week, and you will see the new dashboard. So in principle, it's the same in terms of the data, the same as the old one. You know, I've got create a new lab. I've got some find buttons. I've got 3 find buttons now. So I've got a find series as well as a find lab profile and find lab instance. And I've also got the favorites and the lab instances. There is another page that's going to appear here. This version I'm looking at is a pre-production version. It's not got all the features in yet. The final version, if I just go back to the slide, you'll see that it's got a lab profiles page as well, which is going to show you recently accessed lab profiles as well. Okay, so this one's just a little bit from a code point of view, step out of the way. So the quick actions, actually, Damien, great question there. The quick actions are actually based on your permissions. Okay, so these buttons are actually defined based on your permissions. So for example, if you were somebody that was an instruction editor, but not a lab developer, someone who could create labs, okay, that first button would disappear. Okay, so depending on what your permissions are, the buttons will change. Okay, and we have got plans to expand this. So whereas at the moment we only have the 4 buttons, it's pretty likely we're going to be adding more based on your permissions, like a publish lab, for example. Don't take that as read. I'm just throwing that out there as a possible example. In principle, it looks fairly similar, just laid out differently because we've got these little tabs. But we have some new features in here. So the first thing is you can right-click, not right-click, you can click on the little dots in here and you can customize this. So you can sort different columns. You could pin a column to the left or the right. The columns themselves drag and drop. So you can actually move the columns about if you want to, hopefully. There we go. So you can move stuff around within the platform, hopefully. Well, you should be able to. Again, this is just not the code complete version. Okay, but they do move about. You can so you can sort them, filter. So you can actually, again, use free text filtering to find out what's in there. We've also got the ability for you to turn columns on and off, so you can actually hide or display columns, for example. Once this goes live, there's also, if you come in here and you sort of make a right old mess of it, which is what I do a lot. So if I was to say pin this to the right, for example, there is actually a reset view option as well. Okay, this doesn't work in this pre-production version, but just obviously wanted to show you this and then make it a little bit more live. At the moment, if you want to reset the view, you sort of got to click out and you then click back in and it will reset the view for you. But like always, for those that are a seasoned lab developer attendees, I always like to try and show you stuff as early as possible. Okay, so that you get to see things as we're working on them. So the final version of this is actually in our QA system. It's being tested and things, and it works really, really well. This is just to say that it's actually sort of a couple of code releases behind. The other thing that we're doing is we're just sort of bringing out the Lab Advisor in a bit more detail. There's going to be a lot of activity on Lab Advisor this year. It's sort of gone to sleep a little bit. We're going to be working quite a lot. So this is going to start listing the most critical issues you've got with your labs, and then actually tell you how many labs are actually impacted by that problem. And of course, you can click into there and it would then show you all the labs that are impacted based on that particular problem. So therefore, you can go off and fix those labs. So this one's got 5 labs. So we can see the 5 labs listed there, for example. Okay, so hopefully just trying to put a bit more information front and center for you to hopefully try and raise the quality of those labs. So that should be in production, and you should all be using it before the February Lab Developer Workshop. With the February Lab Developer Workshop in mind, I also would like to mention this new feature that's coming along. This is called Virtual Machine Endpoints. Okay, this is actually what the February Lab Developer Workshop will be on. So I'm not actually going to spend too much time talking about this. But any of you build labs that have got features like nested virtualization, or where you need to be able to maybe connect to the same machine more than once, maybe a Linux machine you want to SSH into, but you also want to be able to have a web browser into the connected to that machine as well. VM endpoints allow you to actually connect to multiple points on the same virtual machine. They will all appear in your resources. You get nice little tabs across the top so you can switch between them. So if you've done things like nested virtualization, imagine actually rather than have to connect to one machine and then connect into the nested machines and you get that Russian doll with your windows in Windows, now you'll just be able to just see them all as resources all in their own right. So that's the idea with this. There's a couple of big use cases we've got for this. We developed it for a couple of customers, but it will be available to everybody. So this will actually be the subject that we'll talk about in February. But we wanted to show you this, just a little screen grab, and just tell you about it so that, again, you're ahead of the curve. So I'm just going to pause for a second. There's nothing gone into the chat, just in case anyone's got any questions about those features they want to ask. No. Okay, so I'm going to show you a slide now, which I'm going to get in trouble for. Okay, so when we do the lab developer workshop and I create the slides for them, let you into a little secret, they have to get blessed by the marketing team. So sometimes I have to do the odd edit after marketing have had their hands on it and approved it. Okay, so here we go. We have an elephant in the room, and I want to be completely upfront and transparent about this. A number of you will be aware that we released the new visual instruction editor. We even had a lab developer workshop on the new instruction editor last year, okay, and we released it. And then because it was all towards like December, there was no lab developer workshops, and then everyone would have gone, oh, it's gone, where'd it go? And all those sort of things. So I just want to talk about it and just sort of tell you where we are. So basically, we withdrew the visual instruction editor because even though we did go through a customer beta, we made a bit of a mistake with the customer beta. We didn't really press aggressively for feedback, and we should have pressed aggressively for feedback, because it actually turns out that a couple of customers basically had problems with it when we went live with it and enabled it for everybody, and they weren't caught. And maybe if we'd actually been sort of interrogating our beta customers a bit more, we might have found these couple of bugs. And they did cause some loss of some instructions. So there was a couple of critical bugs. So that's what made us turn it off, because we didn't want anybody to, we wanted to minimize the impact of those. Those bugs are now fixed, okay? But one of the things it taught us is, effectively, for those that have not seen the new editor, let me show you. Okay, so let me go and find a lab. This one will do. And I'm just going to edit the instructions. So this is what we refer to as our legacy editor. So just the sort of very flat markdown. If I hit the new editor button here, okay, this is our visual editor. Okay, so it sort of gives you a bit of a WYSIWYG style display and so on. But it's also got a code view. Okay, now the code view uses the same editor that the legacy editor does. The visual view uses a different display mechanism, and they understand Markdown in slightly different ways. Markdown is one of these great standards which isn't quite a standard. There are variants in it. And so one of the things we decided to do was refactor the whole product. So we decided that we was going to split the code mode and the visual mode into separate code bases. And the reason for that is we know that in code mode, it's 100% compatible with the legacy editor. We know it's 100% compatible with the legacy editor because they both use a markdown editor called Monaco. Okay, so they both use the Monaco editor. So they are 100% compatible with each other. So the idea is we're now going to release this version of the editor in code mode. So just code mode only. Okay, more likely for the beginning of March. Okay, 6th of March is the date we're aiming for. So this is going to give you the ability to edit the instructions. You've actually got a WYSIWYG view on the right-hand side, because actually that view on the right-hand side is the most important one, because that's the one your users are going to see, whether they're customers or people internal or whatever they might be. But it's going to give you all of the toolbar features. So you're going to get all the things that are going to make it easy for you to actually create instructions and modify the instructions and so on. Okay. And then sometime during Q2, we will reinstate the visual editor, and we'll put this back for customers that want it and new customers coming down the line that might want this as well. Okay. But the great thing is, because we're putting it in separate code bases and we know the code view is 100% compatible, if we ever run into a problem, we had to turn visual mode off, we don't have to turn code mode off, which also means we don't have to turn other features off that are dependent on the new editor. So, for example, one of the features that's dependent on this new editor, and it's a feature we looked at last year, was the screenshot activities, the ability to use AI to capture screenshots and actually evaluate the screenshot to see if the user's completed the task correctly. Okay, so we will re-release that. It will get pushed a little bit based on our timeline, because we're actually rewriting the interface for that. But ultimately, when we get that released, because of splitting the editor code bases in two, it's not going to ever get pulled if we have to pull the visual editor like it did this time. So hopefully that's really great. We are also going to bring some new value add with the editor. Okay, things like document import is going to be coming. Got a Word document? Just give it to the import tool, and it will basically import your Word document as a Markdown file. We've done some testing with this. I was doing some testing recently with a Word document. Okay, it was about 400 pages long, and it had over 1,000 images in it. Okay, and it imported that in under 2 seconds and converted it. Of course, you've got tidy up work to do. The conversion is not perfect. I'm not going to sit here and say that it is, but you're 80% there in 2 to 3 seconds. Okay, so big change.